So I get the honor of being able to talk to you guys about grit, rejection, and art of the pivot. Probably one of the most important things for running a startup, but I think even if you're to take any of these concepts and distill it down to other parts of your life, including your employment, they kind of still are applicable. So a little bit about me. I've been in product for almost 20 years. I've worked across 9 different countries and at 4 different unicorns. And some of the companies I worked for are probably well known to you, some others not so much. So Monzo and Revolut are the 2 largest neobanks in the world, operating out of the UK. And before I started this company, I was at Rappi, running the fintech side of their company, where we built 4 banks across Latin America and raised $3.35 billion, a mixture of direct investment and credit utility. And after that, I came back and built this company, which we'll get to, I guess, at some point if the questions come up. So hint, hint, keep that in the back of your mind. So the first thing we should really talk about has to do really with grit. And I like to start with quotes. I know it's super cheesy, guys, but Angela Duckworth says grit is passion and perseverance for a very long-term goal. So what that means is that it's not about really hitting landing each time. It's about sticking to your vision and continuing to march on. And we'll kind of get into the pivot part, which will explain what that means, because some people think that grit means that even in the face of being completely wrong, you continue to march down that path, which doesn't always work. Now, the one thing to know is that 92% of all companies end up failing within 3 years, especially startups. And part of those reasons have to do actually with grit and determination. And what I mean by that is that as a founder, you're going to end up hearing a lot of rejections, both from investors, from the market, from consumers, from everywhere. And excuse the French here, but you're going to get shit on a lot. It's just the nature of the space that we live in. But the one thing to know is that founders who do have grit, and we'll go into what that means as we lead into it, there's 3 times as many successful founders who have had the determination to continue to march on. Now, some of these companies you probably know, and we'll talk about mine at the very end, but Airbnb is a well-known one because Airbnb was rejected a lot. And if you talk about grit, you have to remember that Airbnb was selling, or not selling, but they were renting out existing available rooms, whether it's in people's homes or even extra overages in hotels. But what people don't know is that they weren't getting investors, the company was failing, and what did they do is they got very smart and they sold basically political cereal to be able to pay their bills. And you can research the story, it's very interesting. But that's the type of grit we're talking about, is determination to continue to march in the face of no. Slack is very interesting. I believe they were originally a Vancouver-based company, but I might be wrong. But they started off actually as a failed gaming company. The only thing that was working was basically a communication app within the game itself, where they were communicating with each other. And us, I know that we're not as big, maybe at some point, but what we had in the beginning was me being rejected every single time. About 200 different rejections I checked. It's a little bit over that, but 200 rejections, and the first 2 concepts failed. The second one was pre-seed funding. So all of this is to say is get ready to being told no, and it's not a good idea. Now, the one thing that you have to constantly overcome as a founder is that you're going to have to overcome investor rejections. Alex remembers this because I kept on hounding him for a long time, early days. But he wasn't saying no, he was saying not now, and kind of guiding me a little bit. So one thing that I will mention is that startups, people think that startups are raising money left, right, and center, but really it's about 1 to 2% that are actually raising institutional VC capital. The rest are not raising money. They're either bootstrapping or raising angel capital or not raising any money at all, which is the most common outcome. Now, some things that you can get in terms of the rejections is that you need to really listen to what the rejections are. Now, this applies in a lot of areas of your life and also the areas of your business, but really there are some core learnings that you get from rejections. People will hear a rejection and their guard will come up right away, like, no, this person doesn't know what they're talking about, they're idiots, whatever. I know what I'm talking about, I'm the master of this. That happens a lot because some people get fake, false bravado as a result of it. But really, the rejections are telling you a few different things. One is, what is the signal the investor is telling me? I can tell you from our story, the signal that we got from, again, I'm just gonna refer to Alex, is that interesting concept, but how are you going to make this work? And more than that, how are you going to build a team to be able to hit this? And there was other questions that came out of it. And sometimes it's not, just like customers, it's not the words that are being told to you, it's the underlying concept that is hinging it. So for instance, as a customer, you might, or as a business, you might hear customers saying, oh, yeah, this is very interesting, but I think there's a lot of competitors in the space. What that's really telling you is a few different things. From an engineering side, they might be saying that, hey, we don't have enough resources because we're already using a competitor. The other thing it could be telling you is that's really interesting, but I don't have the authority to actually resolve this. Or it might be that we don't have enough information. We actually didn't understand the concepts that you were telling us. And there's a lot of things in there because you need to iterate on your presentation. I think Alex has got 20 different decks from the early version of the business. So the real thing to understand from this is that you're going to hear a lot of no's, but don't take it as a diminishing aspect of the process. Don't feel that you haven't made it because no one's ever feels like they made it. But the main thing is that kind of like what Mark Cuban said, every no is just getting you closer to a yes. The other type of rejection is if you're a B2B business, you're going to hear this a lot. You get rejections all the time. So 42% of businesses will fail within the first 3 years, especially if they're B2B, because they haven't found product market fit and they're actually not adapting to the market as it's giving you back the feedback that's required. So again, if we go back to customers, it's not about what they're saying, it's what they're not saying that's more important than anything. So it requires you to do a lot of investigatory conversations and questioning. And there's an entire theory and process for this. The other thing is that you need to identify customer pain points. So as you build a product, what you'll find is that a portion of the product that you built, the majority, the thing that you're pitching, the thing that you're so in love with is not resonating with the customers, but maybe a small segment of it is, and maybe that's the real product. It's not the big thing. That's what happened to us. So just so you guys are aware, we built a BaaS company in the beginning. So we were doing card issuance and bank account opening for third-party startups, so being able to distribute their own cards and do payments across the US. Now, along the way, because of my stubbornness of working in other markets, I forced the bank to do something that they don't do in the US, and that allows us to do a specific type of payment, which is atypical, which is 100% real-time payments between all parties in the US. So the Fed is trying to build this out. They have less than 48% penetration. We have 100% penetration. So we beat the Fed to the market with it. But we didn't know that was the product. So once we figured that out, scrapped everything else. Like hundreds of man hours out the window. So that's what I mean. Sometimes it's not the main product that you're pitching and the thing you're in love with. Sometimes you need to get real about what's actually working and not working. Data is one way, and questioning and understanding is another. And as an example of this as well is that Instagram started off as a location-based sharing platform called Bourbon. And part of that was the users were able to upload photos, modify them a bit, and people were getting shared likes on them. What they found is that the usage on those photos were extremely high, but everything else was failing. So what they did is they doubled down on it, and within 2 months they went from a few thousand users to over 1 million users, because you need to be able to throw away the things that don't work. So grit to persevere, but not inflexibility in terms of the thing that you're getting to. The journey, the end goal is much important than the individual pieces leading you on that journey. I speak very fast, as you can tell. Investors, when I'm having sessions with them, I warn them in the beginning, usually more caffeinated. So the power of the pivot, the most critical and important thing for your startup and probably for yourself in your career. And why that's important is because companies who actually have conducted a proper pivot using market data from the customers, looking and assessing what's valuable in the marketplace, because there are trends that are happening that are constantly changing. Sometimes I would also suggest to look at other geographies, because sometimes what you find is other geographies are further ahead. For instance, with our product, the European market is much further ahead, and Oceania is even further than them. So we stole a bunch of concepts and we brought them here, and then we forced the banks to work on it. So all of that is to say is that companies that have adopted all of these traits will actually become more successful. On average, that's about 2.5 times what you typically see. If you want all the data that led into all of these numbers, I know people are questioning. There is no appendix here, but I'm happy to send it to you after. And why pivot is because of market trends continuously evolve, and you need to find your product market fit. Some examples of this is that YouTube started originally as a video dating app. I don't know if people know that. So they started as a video dating app. The video and uploading was happening at high levels, and people were not using it for dating. So they pivoted into becoming a general video app, and obviously Google bought them. And now we have really shitty rolling ads on all the time. Twitter, interesting as well. They started off as a podcasting platform. I guess maybe they saw the light and they were just too early to it, but they eventually migrated over to being micro blogging. So there was a portion of all of these products. They looked at the market trends that were happening. They saw sections of their app that were working and not working. They doubled down on those and threw away the rest of it because it becomes a nuisance and a headache and also a time and financial sink for everyone. There's a lot of quotes everywhere. I'm not going to read them all for you because I want to get to the questions because that's the most important part. So we're almost there. So how does grit and the pivot, how do they work together? In fact, they go hand in hand because, like I said earlier, you need to have the capacity to continue to push on in the face of no's and rejections, but you need to have the flexibility and understanding to know that the thing that you start off with is more than likely not going to be the thing you end up with. And Alex would know this again from a bunch of the businesses he invested in, that the product that we all pitch is not necessarily the product that we become. So you need to be focused on vision and inflexible on that, but flexible on the way you get to it and the product itself. And a lot of that has to do with getting all that data that we talked about previously, market, customer, and doubling down the main things, and be able to implement it correctly. And again, some additional data is to know that 80% of founders who pivot basically are coming from previous failures and rejections. So if you're getting rejections right now, once you have over 100 VC rejections and over 200-300 customer rejections, then you can think about like, oh, does this work for me or not? But more than anything, you're going to hear a lot of no's. And if you haven't heard no's a lot in your life because you've just been really good at being able to speak smoothly, get used to it. It's going to be very painful. So this is the last slide before we get to the questions, which are probably going to be the most fun part. There are really 3 takeaways from this: is grit will get you into the game, rejections will give you the learnings to stay in the game, and pivoting will give you the opportunities that you need to be able to become successful. And Tony Robbins, some people don't like him, some people like him. This is an interesting quote, which is, the best entrepreneurs are those who turn obstacles into opportunities and stay nimble in the face of change. And that's it for the session. I'm sure that we'll be able to distribute these separately, but I want to see if you guys have any questions regarding this, or regarding anything. Yes?
Tell us more about Kartera.
Sure. So at Kartera, what we do is alternative payments. So one of the problems that you see in North America, and I'm going to be, I guess, rude about North America, is that we have some of the oldest payment rails in the world. Every other geography has figured out how to actually provide faster real-time payments at a low cost. In Europe, they have, because of open banking standards and Payment Services Directive 2, they have something called lightning banking transfers. So I can send you my money from my account to your account in microseconds and no cost. Latin America is similar, Oceania, like I said. What we do is we brought those concepts and we found a way, and this is going to sound not right, but it is. We've hacked the banking ledgers and have allowed us to actually do real-time banking within the entire US geography. So we can move money in real time, and with a typical process, what you have is a lot of different counterparties in between. So if you ever look at a payment authorization flow, you're using Stripe, then there's the card network, then there's the issuing bank, then there's the acquirer, PSP, and the rest. Everyone takes a piece of the pie. And as a result of that, it's like you get a piece of pizza and everyone's taking like 2-3 bites out of it as a merchant. That's the issue. It's they say 2.9% plus 25 cents. It's really more like 3.5 to 5% because there's other costs. So what we charge is 1% because we own 100% of our actual margins. So our net gross profit margins are 98%. A typical PSP, their net gross profit margins are like, I believe, 26, 27%. I sent an email about the analysis, hopefully you saw that. And what we do as a result of that is we incentivize users by providing a reward system. So we go after debit users, and debit users have no value of using their debit cards. Well, we changed that paradigm, and we're creating basically an alternative payment network across the US, which will rival Visa and MasterCard, hopefully. And just, thank you. Thank you. And I guess one,
Like it sounds easy, it's super fucking hard.
yeah. We have to integrate with 2 banking cores. It's a fucking mess. So just for like high level growth number, because I can't give any details as we're kind of doing a bunch of pitches, this year we're growing 1,500%. So it's a massive year, 18 people, and I'm drowning in work. Yeah. Yes.
So very smooth now, the pitch. Out of the 200 rejections, what are some that stand out that led to most of your important pivots?
I've had the gift of gab for a while, right? Yeah, so I'm good. I'm a good speaker, but what I was pitching, and this is the one thing I've realized too, is that you need to speak to the actual audience that you have. So the problem is, so I thought this was a good strategy. I would overwhelm investors with so much data, I would like literally make them feel dumb because I'm like, oh, if I overwhelm them with a lot of data, show them I know this so well. Because I worked at PayPal when I was 16 and payment infrastructure, I built this in my time. So I would do that and investors would not get it. So what mattered, I figured out, was to speak to the right audience at the right way. So with investors, and I don't mean to be derogatory, I dumb it down where it's understandable and the value is very clear, the outcomes are very clear, the value they're gonna get out of it is very clear. Because sometimes as founders, we're very selfish. We're talking about what we're gonna get out of it. Just know that there's another party on the other side. You're the talent, but the most important part is that there's multiple different parties that are part of this relationship that need to also be all managed and taken care of. So, and when we go to sell, for instance, I talk differently to the business folks versus the engineering folks. So that's the one thing I would say is that practice to get your pitch down, but more than anything, adjust your pitch to the market or the audience that you're speaking to. Yeah. Especially if you're a technical founder, you're gonna.
I'll go back.
The investors, the VCs, where did you find them, and what was your pitch to actually get your foot in the door?
I did the mistake that a lot of founders do. I think you remember this. So I'm really good at finding things out online. I was able to get the personal email addresses of a lot of different VCs. I'm talking about every firm in the Valley, every firm in Canada. Oh my God, I blasted all of them. It was really bad. But as I was pitching, I think Alex and a few others would get like, yeah, I think he messaged everyone in our firm. So that was the wrong way. What I eventually did was I got to know people and other founders. So that way I was able to get access to some of their investors by actually speaking to them, getting to know them, maybe even pitching those founders on my concept. If they're interested enough, I potentially get an angel check. If they're not interested enough, if they are even interested beyond that, it would give me interest to their investors. The one thing is, it depends on how you position it. Again, about the audience piece, I would tell them, I have a couple questions. I would love your feedback. Everyone wants to have an opinion, founders, investors. We don't want to put money in. We don't want to make interest, but we'd love to give our feedback to people. So that's a sneaky way of doing it. But that was one way. And since then, since our pre-seed days, after that, it became easier. Once we did press releases and we got a little bit more popular, we were able to get a lot of inbound. And then we leveraged our investors' relationships to get access to the firms that we want, typically bypassing the associate level and going directly either to partner, VP, or MD in some cases. Yeah. Yes?
You guys have payments between, international payments between, like, say,
No,
Canada,
just the US.
So no Canada, US?
No, I tried in Canada, and then after 6 months of not having a pricing matrix, and I blame People's Trust and also DC. I said, F this, and I went to the US. 2 weeks later, I had a fully signed contract ready to execute. That's how easy it is to work with banks in the US versus Canada. Yeah. But we have a plan to come to Canada, and then hopefully we'll be able to cut off the head from Interact.
So, question here. You mentioned you worked at PayPal back in the day. What made you decide to solve this problem as opposed to any other problem?
Yeah, so I started when I was 16. They don't do this anymore, I found out not too long ago, but there used to be a technical aptitude test, like in high school, and then you get like some placement, and then if the company really likes you, they keep you around for a long time. So this was before eBay acquired us. I was there early on working in the earliest phase of being a product analyst, just understanding product and payment infrastructure. By the way, I was a kid that would rip computers apart. I'd do a bunch of like shit. My mom would get mad at me and then put it all back together again. So I like to tinker and figure things out. I come from a family that comes from a war-torn country with really broken financial systems. So I was also an immigrant, and I grew up with 4 people in a bedroom, sharing a bedroom. And a lot of that and grew up with a lot of money problems, hearing it all the time. So I've always been interested in money because, not to gather a bunch of it, but to solve the problem around finance itself. Originally, our concept was to build a corporate banking solution for Canada. It's kind of Brex before Brex became thing here. And we just couldn't get off the ground because I had a lot of family and friends that own small businesses, and I wanted to solve that problem. So then when we got to the US, we couldn't compete with Divvy and Joust and Brex, so we decided to pivot into letting companies create on our platform before we kind of went all the way down and niched down to this product solution. So it was an evolution over time. It was not the original concept. It was 2-3 concepts later. Yeah.
Last question. Anyone have last question?
Yes.
Are you doing anything with crypto in 2027?
No. So here's the thing. There was a holy grail of crypto was to provide low-cost, real-time payments, right? That was one thing. We do it using the banking fiat system. Now, will crypto outstrip us or another payment method? It's possible. I'm not saying that we're better than any other solution. I'm just saying that I don't foresee it right now, though there is a really interesting concept that we have played around with before using crypto as a hedge. I have worked with Currency Cloud and XRP/Ripple before for international payments. So it's possible that we use that as a cross-border payment system because you don't require liquidity pools in other geos, but we haven't gone to that point yet.
I'm going to throw one last question to you, Nabi Awada.
Yes.
So you had lots of experience in Latin America and around the world. What do you think culturally Canadians could do better to be on that matrix? Do we lack the ability to pivot? Do we lack tenacity? If you, I know it's an overgeneralization, but what would you say a lesson for people in this room? Not that everyone's not.
So I'm going to give you the cop-out and the real answer. So the cop-out is the government has done a really poor job of incentivizing entrepreneurship here, including the fact that they've increased corporate income tax, not corporate income tax, but capital gains and other factors. So they're actually pushing a lot of founders out. So there's the government cop-out. The real thing is that we're West Coast in every single way. We're very laid back. We don't like to work very hard, and it sounds bad. I don't mean it like that. It's just that if you work at the highest level in Europe or in New York or in California in terms of like SF, you'll see a big difference between the amount of output that we do here versus there. There's so much talent here. We just haven't figured out how to harness it properly. And we have a very laid back approach, and that's why we get outstripped by America, I think. And that's why a lot of founders in Canada, unfortunately, including us right now, we end up moving to the US.
I'll interject to that because we have our Canadian counterparts, we have our American, and all our American employees are saying, what is wrong with the Canadians? We're not working as hard. We're there 24, you ask for a request, within 2 hours, they're getting what we're asking for back. And the Canadians, and this is a generalization, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Are so, to the, pardon?
2 days if they answer.
2 days if they answer. It's just slow. Why are we rushing?
You know which part of Canada is evolving much faster than this? It's funny enough, is the prairies. So if you look at Alberta, they're developing that culture. I hope it kind of echoes across the rest of Canada. Yeah.
Nabi, thanks for sharing the knowledge.
Thank you. Oh, before I go, I got to tell everyone about this.
Okay.
So a few weeks ago, so everyone's curious, I have staples in my arm. So you see. So a few weeks ago, I got an art piece. If anyone's ever interested in what it is, it was really hard to get into the country. It was 68 kilos. I moved it, and my arm vibrated, and then my bicep tendon from my forearm snapped. And I looked like Popeye, pretty much. It was up here. So a few days ago, I got a hole drilled into my forearm, my tendon pulled through, and then a screw in. So that's why I'm kind of a little bit bionic now.
Well, can I get a round of applause for Nabi?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.